The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble steps of the Imperial Palace as Captain Elena Vasquez was led to the execution platform. Her hands were bound behind her back with neural suppressors, but her spine remained straight, her chin lifted in defiance. The crowd of dignitaries from across the galaxy watched in silence, their faces a mixture of fear and forced compliance. Admiral Kethvar stood on the observation deck, his 4 arms folded across his chest. The Zephyrian's compound eyes tracked every movement below. "Today, we send a message to every corner of the galaxy," he announced to the assembled Imperial commanders. "Human resistance ends here, with this terrorist." Elena had been the Empire's most wanted fugitive for 3 years. The ghost of Kepler Station. They called her a former Imperial Navy captain who turned against her own fleet to save 3 human colony worlds from pacification. She'd sunk supply convoys, rescued civilian populations, and somehow, always, slipped through their nets. Until now, the execution chamber was a marvel of Imperial engineering, designed to broadcast the event to every world in the galaxy simultaneously. Neural disruptors would ensure a clean death, while the quantum relay network carried the signal across space instantaneously. Elena would die, and within seconds, every human in the galaxy would know that resistance was futile. "Any last words?" the Imperial executor asked, his voice amplified across the plaza. Elena looked directly into the primary camera, her green eyes fierce. "My name is Captain Elena Vasquez, former Imperial Navy, defender of humanity. I regret nothing." She paused, and for just a moment, a smile played at the corners of her mouth. "And I'm not afraid of what comes next." The neural disruptor hummed life. A beam of coherent energy struck Elena in the chest as she crumpled to the platform. Medical scanners confirmed complete neural shutdown. The crowd began to disperse. The Imperial Orchestra played the anthem of order, and the cameras switched off. Admiral Kethvar nodded with satisfaction. "Prepare the victory broadcasts. I want this execution replayed on every human world for the next week." His aide, a nervous Centaurian, approached with a datapad. "Admiral, our monitoring stations are picking up unusual quantum resonance patterns. The execution broadcast seems to have triggered some kind of..." The aide's words were cut off by an urgent alarm. The palace's defensive systems had detected something impossible. A massive object had just decloaked directly above the execution platform. Through the transperistyle dome, they could see a human dreadnought hanging in the sky like a steel thundercloud. Its weapon ports were opening, and across its hull, painted in letters 10 meters high, were the words, "Elena's Vengeance." Then another ship appeared, and another. Within minutes, the sky was filled with human vessels of every size and description: military cruisers, cargo haulers, passenger liners, even pleasure craft. Some still bore the scorch marks of hasty modifications, weapons hastily welded to. Civilian hulls. Admiral Kethvar's 4 hearts began beating in panic rhythm. "How is this possible? Our intelligence networks detected no fleet movements, no mobilization orders. How did they coordinate such a massive response so quickly?" The answer was something the Empire had never understood about humanity. When one of their own was murdered, they didn't need orders. They didn't need coordination. They just came. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the cargo vessel Lucky Strike, watching the Imperial capital world grow larger in the view screen. 12 hours ago, she'd been hauling agricultural supplies to the Tau Ceti colonies. Now her ship bristled with improvised weapons, and her crew of 6 had somehow swollen to 37 volunteers who transferred from other vessels during the journey. "Captain, we're receiving thousands of hails from human ships," reported her communications officer, a 19-year-old named Marcus, who'd been a civilian freight coordinator yesterday. "They're all asking the same thing. What's the plan?" Sarah stared at the tactical display. Over 3,000 human ships surrounded the imperial capital, from massive dreadnoughts to tiny shuttles. The largest spontaneous fleet in galactic history, and nobody was in command. The plan? Sarah laughed bitterly. The plan was to watch Elena die and then go back to our regular lives. None of us planned for this. The truth was even stranger than the Empire realized. When Elena's execution was broadcast, it had triggered something unprecedented in human psychology. Every human who watched felt the same primal urge. We have to do something. Now. Captain Jake Morrison of the mining vessel Hard Rock had been the first to move. Watching Elena fall, he'd simply turned to his crew and said, "We're going to the capital." No debate, no discussion. They'd modified their industrial lasers into weapons and launched within an hour. Dr. Amanda Foster had been performing surgery on a research station when the broadcast began. She'd finished the operation, handed off her patients, and commandeered the station's medical transport. "I'm going to help," she told the stunned station commander. "Who's coming with me?" The pattern repeated across human space. Ship after ship, station after station, people simply dropped everything and headed for the capital. They had no unified command structure, no battle plan, no supply lines. They were running on pure human emotion, grief, rage, and the absolute refusal to let Elena's death go unanswered. Admiral Kethver paced the command center of the Imperial Palace, his forearms gesticulating wildly. "This is impossible. You don't just mobilize 3,000 ships overnight. Where are their supply lines? Their command structure? Their strategic objectives?" His chief intelligence officer, a methodical Vorthan named Crix, consulted his displays. "Admiral, our analysis suggests they have none of those things. We're monitoring their communications, and they're improvising everything." "Improvising?" Kethvar's voice cracked. "You can't improvise a fleet action." "Apparently, humans can," Crix replied. "Their ships are organized into random clusters, based on arrival time. They're sharing supplies through bartering systems. Command decisions are being made by committee vote broadcast over open channels. By every military doctrine we understand, they should have collapsed into chaos hours ago. Instead, they were growing stronger. More ships arrived every hour, and the humans were adapting with terrifying speed. Civilian engineers were modifying cargo vessels into missile platforms. Medical ships were becoming mobile hospitals. Luxury yachts were volunteering as courier vessels. Sarah Chun watched another group of ships take position around the capital. "Marcus, open a channel to all. Human vessels. Channel open, Captain. This is Commander Chun of the Lucky Strike. I know we're all here for the same reason. Elena Vasquez was murdered today, and we couldn't just watch it happen. But now we're here, and we need to figure out what comes next." The response was immediate. Hundreds of voices spoke at once, creating a cacophony of anger and determination. Through the chaos, one voice emerged clearly. "We make them pay." "How?" Sarah asked. "We've surrounded their capital, but they're still in control. We can't just start shooting. There are billions of innocents down there." "Then we wait," came another voice. "We wait until they realize that humanity isn't going to forgive this, that we're not going away." Admiral Kethver stared at the tactical display in growing horror. The human fleet wasn't preparing for battle. They were preparing for a siege. And they were doing it with a terrifying efficiency of a species that had learned to survive by working together. "Sir," his aide reported, "we're receiving reports from across the Empire. Human populations on every world are going silent. No work, no trade, no cooperation. It's like they're all waiting for something." Kethver realized with dawning terror that Elena's execution hadn't ended the human resistance. It had just begun the largest coordinated rebellion in galactic history. Asterisk. 3 days after Elena's execution, Admiral Kethver stood in the Imperial War Room, surrounded by holographic displays, showing the deteriorating situation across the galaxy. The human fleet still surrounded the capital, but that was only the beginning of his problems. "Status report," he commanded, his 4 arms working multiple control surfaces simultaneously. General Vextar, the Empire's top military strategist, materialized as a hologram. "Admiral, we have a galaxy-wide crisis. Human populations on 847. Worlds have initiated complete work stoppages. Our supply lines are crippled. 3 major manufacturing centers have gone silent. The humans aren't rioting. They're just stopped." Kethver's compound eyes focused on the strategic display. Red markers indicated human settlements that had ceased all cooperation with Imperial authority. The pattern was spreading like a virus. How is this coordinated? We've monitored their communications. There's no central command giving orders. That's what makes it so dangerous, Vextar replied. They don't need orders. Every human seems to understand instinctively what to do. They're exhibiting what their psychologists call emergent collective behavior. Dr. Yuthron, the Empire's leading xenopsychologist, stepped forward. The ancient keeper's crystalline form chimed softly as she spoke. "Admiral, I've been studying human behavior for 3 centuries. What we're witnessing is unprecedented. They're not following military doctrine. They're following emotional impulse. Elena Vasquez wasn't just a war hero to them. She was a symbol of human resistance. By executing her, we've created a martyr. She was a terrorist." Kethver snapped. "She attacked Imperial vessels, disrupted trade routes, killed thousands of our soldiers." "To us, yes," Dr. Yithran agreed. "But to humans, she was someone who saved their children. When they saw her die, they experienced what they call collective grief. It's triggering behaviors we've never seen before. On the capital world below, the situation was becoming surreal. The human fleet maintained perfect formation, but they weren't attacking. Instead, they were broadcasting. Every ship was transmitting something: music, poetry, recordings of Elena's battles, testimonials from people she'd saved. The capital was surrounded by a chorus of human voices, all telling the same story: Elena Vasquez was a hero, and her death would not be forgotten. Captain Morrison of the Hard Rock was one of the few fleet commanders with actual military experience. He'd volunteered to coordinate the siege, though coordinate was perhaps too strong a word. The humans were operating on consensus, making decisions through open-channel debates that somehow always reached the same conclusion. Wait, watch, and make sure the Empire understood that humanity would not be intimidated. "Captain, his communications." Officer reported, "We're receiving a transmission from the Imperial Palace. Admiral Kethver wants to negotiate." Morrison almost laughed. Negotiate? 3 days ago, they murdered Elena in front of the entire galaxy. Now they want to talk? What should I tell him? Morrison looked at the tactical display, showing 3,000 human ships maintaining perfect formation around the capital. Tell him we'll listen. But first, he needs to understand something. We're not here as representatives of any government. We're here as humans, and humans don't forget. Admiral Kethvar received the response with growing unease. In all his centuries of military service, he'd never encountered an enemy that couldn't be understood through traditional tactical analysis. The humans had overwhelming force, but they weren't using it. They had strategic advantage, but they weren't pressing it. They were simply present. "Admiral," his aide reported, "we're receiving reports from the outer colonies. Human settlements are beginning to leave." "Leave?" "Yes, sir. Entire populations are packing up and departing Imperial space. They're not declaring independence or forming rebellions. They're just going. Our colonial administrators are reporting that humans are simply walking away from their homes, their jobs, their lives, and heading for the frontier. Kethver felt his four hearts skip a beat. The Empire's economy depended on human labor, human innovation, human cooperation. If humanity simply withdrew from imperial space, the consequences would be catastrophic. "Sir," came another report, "the human fleet is broadcasting a message. They want you to hear it." The main screen activated, showing Captain Morrison's weathered face. "Admiral Kethvar, this is Captain Morrison, speaking for the human fleet. We're not here to conquer your capital or destroy your government. We're here to deliver a message." Morrison paused, and behind him, Kethver could see the bridge of the Hard Rock, a civilian vessel modified for war by people who'd never expected to be soldiers. "You killed Elena Vasquez because you thought it would break our resistance. Instead, you've shown us who we really are. We're not imperial subjects anymore. We're not even rebels. We're just humans, and we're leaving." The transmission ended, leaving Kethver staring at a blank screen. For the first time in his military career, he realized he was facing something worse than rebellion. Humanity was simply walking away from 8 centuries of imperial rule, and there was nothing he could do to stop them. Dr. Amanda Foster stood in the observation deck of her converted medical transport, watching the imperial capital world slowly rotate below. It had been a week since Elena's execution, and the human fleet had grown to over 4,000 ships. But more significant than the numbers was what they represented: the complete breakdown of imperial authority over humanity. Doctor, her assistant, a former imperial bureaucrat named David Kim, approached with a data pad. "We're receiving requests from 17 human colonies asking for medical support during their evacuation. They're leaving imperial space entirely." Amanda nodded. Like many others in the fleet, she'd found herself taking on responsibilities she'd never imagined. A week ago, she'd been a research physician. Now she was coordinating medical support for the largest population migration in galactic history. "What's the status of the Kepler sector evacuation?" she asked. "Nearly complete. 3 million humans have already departed for the frontier. They're using everything that can fly: cargo ships, passenger liners, even refitted mining vessels. The Imperial Governor is reporting complete administrative collapse." Through the medical network, Amanda had witnessed something extraordinary. Human communities across the galaxy were self-organizing their own evacuation. Doctors were establishing mobile medical units. Engineers were modifying ships for long-range travel. Teachers were creating educational programs for children who would grow up in transit. It was as if humanity had suddenly rediscovered its pioneering spirit. Captain Morrison floated in the zero-gravity command center of the Hard Rock, surrounded by holographic displays showing human movement across the galaxy. What had begun as a spontaneous response to Elena's execution had evolved into something unprecedented. An entire species was leaving imperial space. "Status report," he called out. 43 worlds have completed evacuation," reported Lieutenant Torres, a former Imperial Navy officer who joined the fleet. "Another 112 are in progress. The humans aren't just leaving, they're taking their infrastructure with them. They're dismantling factories, hospitals, schools, everything they built." Morrison studied the strategic display. The red dots representing human settlements were slowly disappearing from imperial space, replaced by movement vectors heading toward the galactic rim. Any resistance from imperial forces? Minimal. Most imperial commanders are too stunned to react. They're reporting that humans are simply gone. No violence, no destruction, just empty cities and abandoned facilities. Admiral Kethver stood in the Imperial Council chamber, facing the assembled representatives of the galaxy's ruling species. The holographic forms of senators, governors, and military commanders filled the circular room, all demanding answers. He didn't have. Admiral, Senator Korth of the Centauri spoke, his tentacles writhing with agitation. 3 of our major industrial worlds have lost over 60% of their workforce. Our economic projections show complete collapse within 6 months if this continues. The situation is even worse than you realize, added Governor Vexney of the Outer Rim. The humans aren't just leaving, they're erasing themselves from our records. They're taking their research, their patents, their cultural contributions. It's like they were never here. Kethver's 4 arms gestured helplessly. We've tried to negotiate. The human fleet maintains its siege of the capital, but they won't engage in formal discussions. They just keep broadcasting the same message. We're leaving. Then let them leave, Senator Korth snapped. Good riddance to troublesome species. You don't understand, Kethvar replied, his voice heavy with the weight of terrible knowledge. Our analysis shows that humans comprise 47% of our technical workforce, 38% of our medical personnel, and 61% of our agricultural specialists. They're not just laborers, they're the foundation of our civilization. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Empire had conquered the galaxy through military might, but it had prospered through human ingenuity and cooperation. Now that cooperation was ending. Dr. Yithron materialized in the center of the chamber, her crystalline form pulsing with urgent light. Honored Council, I've completed my analysis of human behavioral patterns. What we're witnessing is something our xenopsychology texts never anticipated. An entire species experiencing collective trauma response. Explain, Kethver ordered. Elena Vasquez represented something fundamental to human psychology, the protector of the weak. By executing her publicly, we triggered what humans call pack bonding response. They're not just leaving out of anger. They're leaving because they no longer trust us to protect their young. They're elderly. They're vulnerable. The implications were staggering. For 8 centuries, the Empire had maintained order through displays of overwhelming force. But humanity was responding to that force by simply leaving. They weren't fighting back. They were withdrawing their consent to be governed. What do they want? Senator Korth asked. Nothing, Dr. Yithran replied. That's what makes this so unprecedented. They're not making demands. They're not seeking negotiation. They're just done with us. Captain Morrison received the latest. Reports from human settlements across the galaxy. The exodus was accelerating. Entire star systems were being abandoned as humans packed up their lives and headed for unknown space beyond the galactic rim. Captain, his communications officer reported, we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Kethver. He's asking for a meeting. Morrison looked at the tactical display, showing the human fleet maintaining its patient vigil around the Imperial capital. What kind of meeting? He wants to discuss terms for humanity remaining in Imperial space. Morrison almost laughed. Terms? A week ago, they executed Elena to prove they didn't need to negotiate with us. Now they're offering terms? What should I tell him? Morrison thought about Elena, about the 3 colony worlds she'd saved, about the millions of humans now packing up their lives to leave Imperial space. Tell him that humanity doesn't negotiate with governments that execute our heroes. Tell him we're leaving, and nothing he can offer will change that. The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Kethver staring at a blank screen and finally understanding the true cost of Elena Vasquez's execution. They hadn't just killed a war hero. They'd killed 8 centuries of human loyalty to the Empire. 6 months after Elena's execution, Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the Hard Rock, now serving as the flagship of the new Terran Federation. Through the viewscreen, he could see the construction of Haven Station, the first permanent human settlement beyond the galactic rim. The massive orbital platform was being built entirely by human hands, using technology and resources they'd brought from Imperial space. "Status report," he called out. 57 new colonies established, reported Commander Chun, who'd been promoted to serve as the Federation's logistics coordinator. Population now exceeds 40 million across 12 star systems. Agricultural production is ahead of projections, and our manufacturing capacity should be online within the year. Morrison nodded with satisfaction. The Great Exodus had become something more than just an escape from imperial rule. It had become a rebirth of human civilization. Free from imperial restrictions, human innovation was flourishing. New technologies, new forms of government, new ways of life were emerging in the frontier settlements. "Any word from Imperial space?" he asked. "Regular reports from our intelligence network," Commander Chun replied. "The Empire is struggling. Economic collapse in 7 sectors. 3 major rebellions by non-human species. Admiral Kethvar has been reassigned to frontier patrol duties. Dr. Foster, now serving as the Federation's chief medical officer, joined them on the bridge. We're receiving refugee requests from non-human species. Apparently, word is spreading that humans have successfully established independent civilization beyond imperial reach." Morrison smiled. Elena would have loved this. She always said that humanity's greatest strength wasn't our ability to fight, but our ability to start over. On the imperial capital world, Admiral Kethvar stood in his new, significantly smaller office, reviewing reports from across the galaxy. The human exodus had triggered a cascade of consequences that the Empire was still struggling to comprehend. "Sir," his aide reported, "we've received another request from the Centauri colonies. They're asking for human technical advisors to help maintain their infrastructure." Kethvar's forearms drooped with exhaustion. "Tell them what I told the others. There are no human technical advisors. They're all gone." The irony was bitter. The Empire had executed Elena Vasquez to demonstrate the consequences of resistance. Instead, they'd demonstrated the consequences of taking human cooperation for granted. The galaxy's most innovative species had simply left. "Sir, we're also receiving reports that several non-human species are attempting to establish contact with the human settlements beyond the rim. They're calling it the Free Zone." Kethvar closed his eyes. The humans hadn't just left Imperial space, they'd created an alternative to it. A place where species could live without Imperial oversight, where innovation wasn't constrained by military doctrine, where cooperation was voluntary rather than enforced. "Any response from the human leadership?" "They're welcoming refugees, sir. No questions asked. They're even providing transportation for species that want to leave Imperial space." In the depths of space, light years from the nearest star, a single monument floated in the void. It was a simple structure, a pillar of crystallized human tears, encoding the final message of Captain Elena Vasquez. The message had been discovered in her personal effects after the execution, programmed to broadcast automatically if she was killed. "My fellow humans," the recorded message began, "if you're hearing this, then I'm gone. But don't mourn for me. I knew when I took up arms against the Empire that it would end this way. I made my choice, and I don't regret it." The message continued, Elena's voice strong and confident, even in her final recording. "The Empire thinks that by killing me, they can break our spirit. They're wrong. We're not Imperial subjects, we're human beings. We have something they'll never understand, the ability to choose our own path." The monument broadcast continuously, its signal reaching across the galaxy. It had become a beacon for humanity, a reminder of why they'd left, and a promise of what they could build together. "They executed me to send a message," Elena's voice concluded. "But messages work both ways. My death isn't the end of human resistance. It's the beginning of human independence. We don't need their permission to be free. We just need the courage to leave. Captain Morrison often visited the monument, bringing crews from the various human settlements. Elena's final message had become the unofficial charter of the new Terran Federation, a reminder that freedom wasn't something that could be granted or taken away. It was something that had to be chosen, day after day, by free beings. As he stood before the monument, Morrison reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them here. Elena's execution had been intended to break human resistance. Instead, it had revealed something the Empire had never understood: humanity's greatest strength wasn't their ability to fight, but their ability to walk away from fights that weren't worth having. The Empire still existed, still controlled most of the galaxy, still maintained its military superiority, but it no longer controlled humanity. Elena Vasquez had died a prisoner, but her death had freed an entire species. In the expanding human settlements beyond the Rim, children born after the Exodus were growing up in a galaxy where freedom wasn't a privilege granted by imperial decree, but a birthright that could never be taken away. Elena's legacy wasn't just the colonies she'd saved or the battles she'd won. It was the simple, revolutionary idea that sometimes the greatest victory is knowing when to leave. The monument continued its broadcast, Elena's voice carrying across the void. We don't need their permission to be free. We just need the courage to leave. And humanity had found that courage 15 minutes after the Empire made the mistake of executing their greatest hero.